Hello, everyone. Tonight we're going to begin with a wedding, specifically my son's wedding, and how I accidentally became the star of a story no one was ready for. Picture this: a ballroom drenched in light, music echoing off polished marble, laughter, clinking glasses, and me standing frozen behind a marble pillar, overhearing something that would make your stomach drop. You probably won't survive what's coming next, not emotionally. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you really like what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's get started tonight. It was the third toast of the night. People were crying over fond memories and semi-embarrassing college stories, when I made the ill-advised decision to slip away to the back of the ballroom for a breather. You see, even when you're 63 and the mother of the groom, you can still need a moment to yourself, especially when something doesn't sit right in your gut. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I just happened to hear my new daughter-in-law, Jessica, whisper to her friend. That's how it began. "The plan is simple," Jessica said, her champagne flute catching the chandelier light. "We give it 6 months. Start documenting. If she forgets anything, names, routines, anything, we'll get her evaluated. From there, it's just paperwork. She'll be in a care home before summer." The friend laughed nervously. "Isn't that a little harsh?" Jessica swirled her drink. "It's mercy. She's alone in that giant house, 63, and losing her edge. David deserves that beach house, after everything he's been through." Now, here's a little-known truth about aging. You don't actually lose your hearing. You just get better at pretending you didn't hear things you weren't supposed to. But I heard that. All of it. Every word. My blood didn't just run cold. It froze solid, did a U-turn, and marched up my spine like a parade of regrets. Instead of confronting her right there, I smiled, walked calmly to the bar, ordered a double whiskey with the grace of a seasoned spy, smiled at the bartender, at the guests, at the glowing couple I was apparently supposed to trust with my legacy. "You okay, ma'am?" the bartender asked. "Absolutely," I said, lifting my glass. "To family." You know what the ancient Greeks believed? That your greatest downfall would come not from enemies, but from those you loved most. I'd call that remarkably prophetic. David, my baby boy, had grown into a tall, handsome man with kind eyes and a terrible taste in women. And in that moment, he was across the ballroom, holding Jessica's hand like it was the last life raft on the Titanic. I sipped my whiskey and let the fire slide down my throat. It wasn't just alcohol, it was armor. Now here's an odd fact to lighten the mood. Flamingos bend their legs at the ankle, not the knee. I told you this would get weird. Anyway, back to the ballroom. Jessica saw me watching and smiled, waved like we were the best of friends, and I waved back because that's what we mothers do at weddings. We smile, we wave, we pretend the iceberg doesn't exist. But I wasn't pretending anymore, not after that. The chandelier above me glittered like a sky full of stars, but none of it felt real. The grand ballroom at the Riverside Country Club was something out of a high society magazine. Every table was perfectly arranged with white roses, eucalyptus branches, and candles floating in glass bowls. Crystal flutes clinked to toasts that rang hollow to me now. It was beautiful but cold, sterile, and suffocating in the way only a lie dressed up in white can be. Somewhere near the stage, the jazz quartet played their 10th cover of "What a Wonderful World." I almost laughed at the irony. My world, my quiet, comfortable, slightly boring world, was being threatened under the golden glow of this elegant facade, and I couldn't even scream. I watched David, my sweet, thoughtful David, smiling as if all was perfect. His tuxedo fit like a glove, his hair neatly combed back, and his arm wrapped protectively around the very woman who had just plotted my mental demise. I wondered if anyone else noticed the performance. Probably not. People don't look too closely at weddings. They want happy endings. They don't want backstage access to the family drama. Here's an old age fact. You stop trying to win people over, not because you don't care, but because you've learned that the people worth keeping don't need convincing. A younger me might have caused a scene. Maybe knocked over a flower arrangement or confronted Jessica mid-toast with the dramatic, "How dare you?" But 63-year-old me knew better. You don't yell fire when the match hasn't been struck. You wait, you observe, and then, when the time is right, you light the whole thing up in a controlled blaze. "Mom, you okay?" David's voice pulled me back. I turned to see him loosening his tie. Cheeks flushed from champagne or happiness, probably both. "Just a little tired, sweetheart. It's been a long day." He smiled. "Jessica wants to talk to you about Christmas plans. She has some new ideas for traditions." "Oh, I bet she does," I said. "How lovely. We'll chat later." He squeezed my shoulder, reassuring, like I was the one who needed comforting. Then he walked back toward Jessica, who gave me the same smile you'd use on a toddler about to have their toy taken away. Now, here's a completely unrelated fact. Goldfish have a memory span longer than we used to believe, up to 5 months, which is still better than David's current memory apparently, because mine seemed to be the one he was rewriting. As I stood there, all I could think about was the beach house, the one Robert and I had bought 30 years ago. Monterey breeze in our hair, sea salt on our lips, and David's tiny footprints trailing behind us in the sand. It was sacred, a sanctuary built from love and sacrifice. And now? Now it was a prize in someone else's game of Monopoly. I returned to the bar. The bartender raised an eyebrow. "Another? Let's just say I'm pre-gaming for the second half of my life," I replied. He chuckled. "Rough night." I nodded. "You believe in karma?" "In this job, I've seen enough to believe in aliens, ghosts, and people changing overnight." "Well," I said, lifting my glass again, "let's hope karma's punctual." The whiskey burned less this time. It occurred to me that life is just one long balancing act between pretending everything is fine and quietly unraveling behind a smile. Weddings are no exception. They're theatrical by nature. Everyone wears costumes, reads lines, and plays roles that don't quite fit. Today, I was the proud mother of the groom. Tomorrow, apparently, I'd be the doddering old widow they'd try to declare unfit. Academic sidebar here. There's an entire field of psychology dedicated to family systems theory. It argues that families operate like emotional units, each member playing a specific role. If one person changes, the whole system shifts. Guess what happens when a matriarch decides she's done playing the fool? Yeah, everything tips. I slipped outside to the patio for some air. The sun had just set, and a chill rode in on the coastal wind. I leaned against the stone railing, feeling the breeze tease my hair. Inside, the party carried on. Glasses clinked. Laughter soared. Jessica danced. I looked up at the stars and whispered, "Robert, you seeing this?" No answer, of course. But if he were watching, I hoped he was proud. Because I wasn't going to let anyone, especially not someone who wore fake pearls and spoke in therapist tones, take away the life we built. The thing about houses, real homes, is that they carry weight. Not just in square footage or value, but in memories. And none held more for me than the beach house in Monterey. We bought it 30 years ago, back when Robert still wore a mustache that didn't suit him, and I had a perm I wish we'd burned all the pictures of. We didn't have much, but when we stood on that bluff looking over the Pacific, we knew. This was going to be our place. That house had wood siding that always needed painting, windows that rattled in the wind, and floors that creaked like they were keeping secrets. But it was ours. It saw David's first surf lesson, his first sunburn, and the very first time he climbed into bed between us after a nightmare about sharks. It was also where Robert proposed. I still remember the smell of salt and sunscreen, and how he dropped the ring in the sand and panicked for 10 solid minutes before finding it. Romantic? Not really. Memorable? Absolutely. Jessica wanted that house. That wasn't speculation, that was fact. I saw it in her eyes when I showed them old photos on the mantle. "This is the beach house?" she asked, like she'd just spotted buried treasure. "It's gorgeous. You should really get it praised." And that's the first rule of dealing with people like Jessica. If they start talking about the value of something before the meaning, run. I think it's funny how younger people assume older folks are emotionally fragile. Truth is, we're just more deliberate with our reactions. That doesn't mean we don't see what's happening. It means we're watching the whole chessboard while they're obsessed with their next pawn move. David, poor thing, didn't notice the way Jessica's tone changed every time the beach house came up. Didn't clock how she made casual remarks like, "You could turn that into a great retreat space," or "It's such a waste for one person to have that much." Waste, as if joy and solitude were inefficient uses of property. Here's an odd fact for your trivia brain. Seahorses mate for life, and it's the male that carries the babies. The world is full of weird surprises, so if a male seahorse can do the heavy lifting, you'd think a 32-year-old man like David could, at the very least, pay his own rent. But I digress. I started to realize that Jessica was staking her claim long before any wedding bells. Every conversation we had about the future somehow led back to that house. She brought it up casually, like someone might mention weather, but her eyes, calculating. She wasn't just imagining the furniture layout, she was estimating resale value. Old age wisdom number 3. When someone talks too much about your future, they're probably trying to erase your past. "Have you ever thought about downsizing?" she asked once over tea, stirring her cup with unnecessary precision. "That beach house must be a lot to manage." I smiled. "You'd be surprised what I can manage." Truthfully, I had thought about it. The upkeep, the drive, the loneliness of being there without Robert. But thoughts and actions are very different things, and I didn't need a 28-year-old stranger pushing me toward either. Academic argument of the day. Real estate ownership isn't just about land. It's about identity, particularly for widows. The property becomes a form of agency, of grounding, of memory preservation. So when someone like Jessica tries to pry it from your hands, it's not just property theft, it's erasure. One evening, I stood alone on that beach, the Pacific wind pressing against my sweater, thinking about what that place had seen. The fights, the reconciliations, the years of building something real, something lasting. And I knew then, Jessica could never understand that kind of love. She only understood acquisition. And still, I stayed quiet. Sometimes silence isn't about fear. It's about strategy. A lion doesn't roar while it stalks. It waits until it's ready to strike. I knew I was getting close. And here's the thing that really got to me. I could have left that house in a will, passed it down with grace. But Jessica didn't want legacy. She wanted leverage. She was trying to box me into a corner so she could make her move. So I made mine first. It began with a conversation with my lawyer, but in my mind, it began with that whisper behind the marble pillar. She thought I was just a mother, just a widow, just some aging relic standing in the way of her beachfront vision board. She was wrong. I wasn't a placeholder. I was the plot twist. David used to call me every Sunday without fail. Rain or shine, hungover or homesick. From college dorm rooms, job interviews, and even once from a freezing airport tarmac in Chicago. Just wanted to hear your voice, he'd say. And I'd always pretend like it didn't make me tear up. But the moment Jessica entered his life, those calls became texts, then voice notes, then silence. At first, I thought it was just new love. We've all been there, right? Eyes like blinders, mind full of shared Spotify playlists and brunch selfies. I gave him space. Everyone deserves a whirlwind romance. But whirlwinds shouldn't demolish the foundation. And David, he was getting uprooted piece by piece. I still remember the first dinner Jessica came to. She brought wine, French, too expensive, and wore a dress that probably cost more than my dining table. I'd made baked ziti, my late husband's favorite, and she complimented it 5 times. "This is amazing, Maggie. I can't believe you still cook like this. At your age?" At your age, there it was. The kind of comment you sugarcoat with a smile and swallow like a pill with no water. It was clear from the start she wasn't just dating my son. She was auditioning for the lead role in our family story, and she intended to rewrite the script. Old age wisdom, number 4. Never underestimate the ambitions of someone who flatters too early and too often. They're usually rehearsing. That night, Jessica and David sat side by side like they were hosting a morning show, finishing each other's sentences, laughing too easily, touching too often. I could feel the shift in the air, like the thermostat had dropped, even though the oven was still warm from dinner. "How did you two meet again?" I asked, leaning back in my chair. "At the gym," David answered quickly, eyes darting to her. She was struggling with the weights. Jessica laughed lightly. I was pretending to struggle. I'd been watching him for weeks. "Charming," I said. "Stalking is so romantic these days." She giggled, but there was a flicker behind her eyes. The kind you see when someone doesn't like being challenged. David changed the subject, and I let him. It's a peculiar thing to watch your child fall in love with someone who isn't just wrong for them, but dangerous. Like watching a friend paddle toward a riptide while you stand helpless on the shore. Then came the unsolicited advice. "Maggie, your spice cabinet is so chaotic," she said one night while cooking uninvited. "Mind if I reorganize it?" Or, "I read an article about retirement planning. You're not still managing your portfolio yourself, are you?" Every word laced with sweet concern, every sentence sharpening its edge a little more. Now for something off topic. Did you know octopuses have 3 hearts? And 2 of them stop beating when they swim. They literally break their own hearts to move forward. That's what loving David felt like these days. When I brought up the beach house one afternoon, just reminiscing, Jessica lit up. It would make a perfect wellness retreat. Picture it. Yoga on the deck, sound baths in the living room. I smiled politely. "It's not for sale." "Of course," she said, eyes glinting. "Just a thought." But I saw the gears turning. Academic argument incoming. In behavioral economics, there's a concept called nudging, influencing people's decisions through subtle cues and framing. Jessica didn't shove. She nudged, gently, consistently, deviously. Before long, David started parroting her. "Mom, don't you think you should have some help with the garden? Maybe it's time to hire a financial advisor. You've got a lot on your plate these days, huh?" It was death by suggestion, and I was beginning to feel the weight of each one. One evening, after yet another accidental drop-in, Jessica and I were alone in the kitchen. She was doing dishes I never asked her to do. "You're amazing, you know," she said, without looking up. "I've been told," I replied. She turned, hands dripping. "I just mean, managing everything at your age? That's impressive." I tilted my head. "You mention my age a lot." She paused. "Do I?" "Yes, makes me wonder what age you think people turn to stone." She gave that tight, glossy smile again. I just worry about you, Maggie, all alone in that big house. Ah, there was the rehearsed line, the pitch before the scheme. Well, I said, drying my hands, I worry about you too, Jessica. Me? She blinked. Why? Because no one that eager to play daughter-in-law is just here for the ZT. She blinked again, but slower this time. We didn't speak much for the rest of the evening. Later, David texted me, Jessica thinks you don't like her. Please try to make an effort. I stared at the message for a long time. An effort? I raised him through job losses, hospital visits, scraped knees, and sleepless nights. I was the effort. But love makes us do foolish things. And sometimes, the biggest fools are the ones who stay silent while watching the people they love walk into disaster. 2 weeks later, the situation escalated from unsettling to surreal. David, pacing around my kitchen in socks, his voice a mix of excitement and nervousness, dropped the news like it was just another grocery list item. We're moving in together, he said, grinning from ear to ear. I paused mid-stir of my tea. Moving in where exactly? He motioned vaguely toward the open window, like the house would materialize from the backyard fog. Into the Maple Street place. You know, the investment property. It's just sitting there. I blinked. Sitting there? That was the house I bought 3 years ago as a long-term asset. The one I'd let him crash in temporarily after his last breakup. The one where his ex-girlfriend left him with emotional scars and maxed out credit cards. You mean the house I'm still paying the mortgage on? I asked casually. Right, he said quickly. But Jessica and I love it. She's got this amazing vision for it. We could really build our life there. The part that struck me the hardest, we. He had stopped saying I altogether. Old age wisdom number 5. When someone starts replacing I with we too quickly, it's not love, it's marketing. I glanced at Jessica, sitting across the table, her legs crossed neatly like she was in a home staging brochure. That faint smile never left her lips. That's wonderful, I said, sipping my tea. Have you thought about when you might want to take over the mortgage payments? David's smile faltered like a radio losing signal. I mean, we're family. Can't we work something out? David, we've been working something out for 2 years. Jessica leaned forward and gently touched my hand. Maggie. I hope you don't think I'm pushing him into anything. The last thing I'd want is to come between you and your son. There it was. That sentence. Always the last thing they want. Right before it's the first thing they do. Off-topic fact of the day. Bananas are berries, but strawberries aren't. Makes you question everything you thought you understood. Kind of like family. I smiled politely. Of course not, dear. I'm just practical when it comes to business. Jessica's eyes lit up. What if we transition gradually? David can start with utilities and ease into covering the mortgage. That way, it's not overwhelming. Overwhelming, I repeated. For a 32-year-old man to pay bills in the house he's living in. Jessica didn't flinch. She nodded sympathetically. Exactly. Academic tangent here. In sociology, there's a term called learned helplessness. It's when someone gradually accepts negative conditions because they've been conditioned to believe they can't change them. What no one talks about is applied helplessness, where a person pretends to be incapable in order to avoid responsibility. David was starting to look like a case study. Sounds thoughtful, I said, folding my napkin. David exhaled like he'd just diffused a bomb. See, Jessica's amazing at this stuff. She just finds solutions. Solutions, sure, like termites finding new corners to chew through. Subtle, quiet, destructive. Within a month, they were fully moved in. Jessica redecorated with such haste. It was as if she'd been waiting for this moment all her life. Gone were the warm wood furnishings I'd chosen myself. In came shades of gray, white, and sterile minimalism. She even changed the kitchen handles. Who changes kitchen handles in a rental? Bills stopped arriving in my mailbox. Utilities weren't redirected. The mortgage? Still my name on every payment. I called David. Jessica answered. "Oh, hi Maggie. David's in the shower. Everything okay?" "Just wondering about those payments we discussed." A pause. "Right. We've been meaning to talk to you. Things have been tight, what with Jessica's career transition and moving expenses. Again. That's fine," I said. "Next month then?" "Absolutely," she chirped. "Fresh start." Next month came and went. And the month after that. Then, while driving past Maple Street, I saw a brand new BMW parked in the driveway. The cherry on top. David's old Honda was gone. I called him that evening. "Nice car," I said casually. "A beat." "Then, how do you know about the car?" "I own the house, remember? Sometimes I drive by." "That's kind of weird, Mom." "Weird. Imagine that. Jessica needs reliable transportation for her new coaching business. It's an investment." "Oh, like the house?" "Mom, we need to talk." "About the mortgage?" "Jessica and I feel like you're using it as leverage." I nearly choked on my tea. "Leverage? It's not healthy family dynamics," he said, like he'd memorized the phrase from a Pinterest quote board. Healthy dynamics. Old age wisdom. Verse 6. When people start quoting therapy lingo to justify selfishness, they've already made up their mind. You're the villain, and they're the victim. "Well then," I replied, "maybe we do need to talk." David seemed relieved. "Good. Jessica says it's important to set boundaries." "I agree. Let's start with financial ones." I hung up and stared out the window. The sun was setting, and the last rays of light lit up my garden, untouched by Jessica's reorganizing hands. Still mine. Then I poured myself a glass of wine, opened my file drawer, and pulled out David's lease agreement. Signed, witnessed, and enforceable. Sometimes motherhood means letting go. Other times it means reading the fine print. By the time I walked into Thomas Hartwell's office, I wasn't second-guessing anymore. No more hoping it was just a misunderstanding. No more believing my son would magically wake up, shake the glitter out of his eyes, and remember who raised him. No, I was done waiting. Thomas looked up from his desk with mild surprise. "Margaret, didn't expect you today." I smiled politely. I figured it was time to do something constructive with all this parental disappointment. He chuckled softly. "I assume this is about David." "And Jessica," I said, sinking into the leather chair across from him. "More Jessica than David, if I'm being honest. Old age wisdom." 7. You can't always save your children from falling in love with the wrong people, but you can save them from signing over the deed. I handed Thomas a folder. Property details, financial statements, and a handwritten note that simply said, "Price to sell. Fast and clean." "You're serious," he said, flipping through the pages. "Very. Both properties." "Yes." "The house on Maple Street and the beach house in Monterey?" he asked, peering over his glasses. I nodded. "I want them liquidated within 60 days. List them below appraisal if needed." Thomas paused, pen in hand. "That beach house is worth over $2 million, and it's worth losing sleep over. Price it to move." He leaned back. I have to ask, what triggered this? I could have told him about the whispers at the wedding, the unpaid bills, the BMW, the disappearing David, but instead, I gave the only answer that felt right. "I'm tired of pretending people who bite my hand deserve to keep eating from it." Academic insight for today. In legal theory, the concept of inter vivos transfers, gifts made during life rather than in a will, often lead to more conflict than inheritances. Why? Because people don't like being told no when they've already counted your assets as theirs. Thomas sighed. "David will be notified, of course. Only when necessary. I'm not dead yet." Legally, you're right, but he may still. Thomas, I said gently, do you remember Robert's will? He smiled. Of course. Robert was very precise. Well, I want to be precise too. I want new accounts for the sale proceeds at a different bank. He raised an eyebrow, planning to disappear, planning to prepare. Off-topic fact of the day. There's a species of jellyfish that can revert its cells and essentially live forever. Meanwhile, humans can't even agree on who's responsible for paying the electric bill. Thomas started writing up the necessary paperwork. Where should I send confirmation? I'll stop by next week. Use encrypted email for now. And David, let him keep thinking everything's fine. The moment he needs to know, he'll know. Now here's where it got interesting. As Thomas printed out forms, I said, I also need a background check. He paused. On Jessica? Full history, employment, legal, civil suits. I want to know who she is when the pearls come off. He scribbled a note. Any leads? She used to work in social services, elder evaluations. Thomas slowly looked up. You think she's done this before? I know she's done this before. I just don't have the proof. Yet, a knock sounded at the office door before his assistant peeked in. Mr. Hartwell, Detective Morrison called back. He said he's available to meet next Thursday. Perfect timing. I turned back to Thomas. Get me everything you can. I have a feeling I'm not her first victim. You think she's targeting people like you? No, I said. I know she's targeting people like me. He nodded. Then let's make sure she picked the wrong widow this time. Funny how just making a decision can give you back your spine. For months, I'd been watching things slip out of my control. My son, my home, my identity. But now, I was holding the reins again. By the time I walked out of that office, the properties were as good as gone. The papers signed, the wheels in motion. That night, I slept without waking up once. No dreams, no doubts, no second thoughts. Well, maybe one thought. Let's see what Jessica does when the walls start closing in. It started small, like it always does. A shift in tone, a missed call. A silence that stretches longer than it should. David, who used to drop by with tulips on rainy Thursdays and ask if I needed help changing the smoke detector batteries, suddenly had a lot going on. Texts dwindled. Phone calls became rushed. When I did catch him, Jessica's voice was usually somewhere in the background, giving input I hadn't asked for. Old age wisdom, number 8. Silence in a relationship is rarely empty. It's full of the things people are too afraid or too proud to say. He missed our usual lunch at Ivy and Fern, claimed he'd forgotten, then forgot my friend Elaine's birthday dinner. Something he never did because Elaine makes a lemon tart he'd sell his shoes for. It's just been hectic, he told me, shrugging, when I finally got him on the phone. Jessica thinks I've been spreading myself too thin. She says it's important to have boundaries. Between a son and his mother, I asked. It's about emotional independence, Mom. I raised an eyebrow, even though he couldn't see me. Since when do you worry about being too close to me? He hesitated. It's not like that. It always is when someone's feeding you just enough psychology jargon to keep you blindfolded. Jessica was clever. She wasn't pulling him away with drama or ultimatums. She was using distance disguised as growth. Like she was Marie Kondoing his emotions, tidying up anything that made him feel tethered to the past. Off-topic fact. Crows remember human faces and will even hold grudges. So if you've ever offended a crow, it's probably waiting for the right moment. Just saying. I decided to test something. A simple, silly test. I texted David on a Tuesday and asked, Hey, do you remember the name of that Italian place we went to after your college graduation? No response for hours. When he finally replied, it was a guess, and it was wrong. I'd known he wouldn't remember. That wasn't the test. The test was whether Jessica would follow up. And she did. The next day she called me. Maggie just wanted to check in. How's everything? I'm fine, thank you. She paused, clearly hoping I'd elaborate. I didn't. I know David missed lunch the other day. He's just been under a lot of pressure with the move and the wedding. So I've heard. I hope you're not taking it personally. Oh, I don't take things personally anymore, I said. I take notes. Silence on her end. Then, you know, Maggie, maybe we should all talk. Maybe with a professional. Ah, there it was. Academic tidbit. Triangulation is a psychological manipulation tactic where one person creates conflict between two others to control both. Jessica was doing it with finesse, pitting David's loyalty against his history, with herself as the neutral problem solver. She didn't want peace. She wanted control over the narrative. And the narrative now was, Maggie is lonely. Maggie is forgetful. Maggie is emotionally unstable. Soon after that call, David left a voicemail. Hey Mom, Jessica thinks we should maybe talk to someone together, like a family therapist. It could help us reconnect. It doesn't mean anything's wrong, just, I don't know. Let's talk. Reconnect. As if someone had snipped the thread and was now offering me the dull end of the scissors. Later that week, I overheard them talking outside their house as I dropped off a letter I'd forgotten to mail. Don't judge, I still use stamps. Jessica, we just need to get her evaluated. If she refuses, that says more than anything. David, she's not crazy. Jessica, of course not. But she's isolating herself, selling the properties. That's not like her. David, maybe she just wants to simplify. Jessica, or maybe she's struggling and doesn't realize it. That's how it starts. Confusion, poor financial judgment. I didn't stay to hear the rest, but I heard enough. Enough to know that Jessica had already started building the foundation for her next move. The concerned daughter-in-law routine, the I just want what's best for her line, and the eventual psychiatric intervention, complete with a professional evaluation, sympathetic nods, and, if all went according to plan, legal control over my assets. Off topic but fitting, elephants can recognize themselves in mirrors. You'd be surprised how few humans can do the same. By the following Monday, I had returned to Thomas Hartwell's office with a printout of David's lease, a copy of the deed to the Maple Street house, and a note that said, "Move quickly." He looked at me. "You ready?" "I'm not just ready," I said. "I'm done." I may have lost my son's daily calls and warm Sunday hugs, but I still had my clarity. And I wasn't about to let anyone take that from me. They say the devil's in the details, but when it comes to Jessica, the devil was in the driveway. A gleaming new BMW, jet black, parked right in front of the Maple Street house. It stood there like a silent insult. Like it knew, like it was smirking. Gone was David's old Honda, the car with the crooked antenna he never fixed, and the coffee stain I warned him would never come out. That car had heart. This one had something else. Vanity plates, personalized no less. Something vague and motivational like LVN free. I stood across the street, arms folded, and I could hear Robert in my head. "They're paying for that on credit. You just wait." And he would have been right. David answered my call that evening like nothing had happened. "Hey Mom, what's up?" "Nice car," I said flatly. There was a pause. Thanks? How did you afford it?" Another pause. "We got a great deal." "David, you can't even cover utilities." He sighed. "Jessica needs reliable transportation. It's for her business." "You mean the wellness coaching career that hasn't produced a single invoice?" "She's in a building phase. It's about investing in yourself. Old age wisdom." Number 9. People only say it's an investment when they're trying to explain why they spent money they didn't have. I cut to the point. "Let's talk mortgage." David groaned. "Mom, not this again." "Yes, this again. I've been more than patient." "Jessica and I think you're being Controlling. Controlling. There's that word again. Funny how asking a 32-year-old man to pay rent is now called emotional abuse. Controlling, I repeated. Because I expect you to honor your financial obligations? It's the way you talk about it. Like the house is some kind of weapon. It's my asset, David. I bought it. I maintain it. You were living in it temporarily. He hesitated. We just feel like you're holding it over our heads. We? I asked. Jessica feels that way? He didn't answer. Off-topic moment. The oldest known living organism is a patch of seagrass in the Mediterranean estimated to be over 100,000 years old. Imagine staying rooted that long without someone trying to repot you. Well, I said, trying not to raise my voice. I've been thinking about family dynamics too. Like how they change when someone new comes in and starts speaking for the person you raised. He bristled. That's not fair. No, I said, but it's true. Academic point here. In family therapy, there's a model called structural family theory. It emphasizes boundaries, clear, healthy ones. Jessica wasn't respecting mine, and David, he wasn't defending them. I'm calling Thomas tomorrow, I said. Why? To revisit the lease. There was silence, that kind of silence that tastes like metal in your mouth. I added, by the way, Jessica's not on the deed. People might start asking why she's been telling them otherwise. How do you know that? I still know people, David. Just because I use the landline doesn't mean I live under a rock. He hung up, just like that. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and pulled out the original copy of the lease agreement. Signed by David, notarized by Thomas, tucked away neatly behind my passport in the safe. I reread it. 30 days notice for termination, legal, binding, airtight, and it would be delivered soon. The next day, I called Thomas. It's time, I said. You're sure? He asked. Absolutely. Terminate the lease, file the notice, get the ball rolling. And Jessica? Let her find out like the rest of them when it's too late to stop it. The most twisted part of all this, Jessica had probably spent weeks, if not months, orchestrating this entire arc. The charm offensive, the slow erosion of David's independence, the subtle undermining of my competence. She was playing chess, and she thought I was the queen she could trap in a corner. But what she forgot is that queens are the most dangerous piece on the board. Old age doesn't make you soft. Sometimes it makes you sharp. The notice was delivered on a Thursday morning, right after Jessica left for one of her client consultations, which I imagined involved more incense and Instagram than invoices. David called me 20 minutes later. He didn't even say hello. Mom, we got a letter from Hartwell's office about the house. Good morning to you too, sweetheart. How's the weather? Seriously, Mom? Seriously. We have 30 days? You're selling it? I took a deep breath and looked out the window, where the camellias I planted last spring were blooming again. Funny how things kept blooming even as people fell apart. That's right, I said. 30 days. You can't do that. I can. I did. Check your lease. But you said, I said temporarily, and you stopped paying rent after the first month, remember? His voice cracked. We just needed time. 6 months wasn't enough? We had expenses. I raised an eyebrow, though no one could see it. Yes, I saw the BMW. That's not the point. It's entirely the point. He was pacing. I could hear it in his breath. That uneven rhythm of someone desperate to find higher ground in a sinking ship. This is our home, he said. We've built a life here. No, David, you squatted in a house I paid for while pretending it was a gift. We were going to start paying. When? After the house appreciated? Or after I forgot I owned it? He went quiet. Off-topic fact. The lifespan of a housefly is around 28 days. That's how long Jessica had to figure out her next move. Then came the line I'd been expecting. Jessica thinks you're overreacting. There it was. Jessica also thinks I'm mentally unfit. Would you like to discuss that next? Another pause. She's just worried. You've been making rash decisions. Selling your properties without telling anyone. That's not normal. Not normal or not convenient. Old age wisdom 10. When people challenge your sanity, it's often because your clarity threatens their comfort. Mom, this isn't fair. No, it's not. What's unfair is watching your child disappear behind someone else's voice. I could hear Jessica returning in the background, her heels clicking against the tile like punctuation marks. Look, let's talk later, he mumbled. Jessica wants. I'm sure she does. I hung up. Then I called Thomas again. How soon can we close? I asked. Maple Street could close within 45 days. The beach house, 60 at most. Good, do it, and set up a new account, different bank. He hesitated. And if David shows up? Remind him that I'm not dead. Yet. Thomas chuckled. Note it. Academic sidebar. In legal terms, the moment a property owner signs a sales contract, the asset ceases to be protected under inheritance expectations unless specified in a will. Translation: David had no legal claim once I put ink to paper. I also asked Thomas one more thing. How's that background check coming along? You might want to sit down, he said. Go ahead. Jessica Morrison, age 28. Worked in adult protective services for 5 years in 3 states. 2 civil lawsuits filed by elderly clients, both settled quietly. 1 criminal conviction in Nevada for fraud. Alias at the time, Jessica Wells. I whistled. She kept her maiden name for her cons? Apparently, she's efficient. And predatory. Off topic but weirdly appropriate. A female praying mantis often bites off the head of her mate after breeding. Love and murder in one elegant motion. Can we prove intent? I asked. Not with this alone, but paired with a pattern, her job history, and her relationship with your son, we might have something. Get everything ready, I told him. I have someone else I need to call. That someone was Detective Morrison. Yes, he said when I asked. I'm still very interested. She's my half-sister, and I've been tracking her for 3 years. Then I hope you're free for dinner next week. I could practically hear him smile through the phone. I'm bringing backup. I spent the next few days reviewing documents, organizing everything into folders labeled with little pastel tabs. Who says revenge can't be tidy? Jessica hadn't just underestimated me. She'd underestimated what 63 years of grit, grief, and growth had taught me. You don't survive a decade without a husband, rebuild your finances, raise a child solo, and still have your sanity intact without learning how to draw a line. Jessica thought I wouldn't draw that line. She was about to learn I'd drawn it in steel. The call came early one morning as the kettle began to hum. I was in my robe, barefoot on the tile, and the sun had just started to peek through the kitchen blinds. Jessica. No warm greeting, no false cheer, just 5 clipped words. Maggie, we need to talk. Oh, good morning to you too, dear. We're staying with my sister. This situation is completely unacceptable. I stirred honey into my tea. I'm sorry to hear you're having housing difficulties. How's the BMW holding up? She didn't laugh. This isn't funny. Then you probably shouldn't have treated your landlady like she had dementia. A pause. Then, you knew? I'm 63, Jessica, not 93. And I've raised a child, run a household, managed investments, and buried a husband. Do you really think I couldn't hear you whispering 10 feet away with a champagne flute in your hand? Her tone shifted. From annoyance to that syrupy condescension I'd grown to recognize as her default setting. Maggie, I think you're misunderstanding the situation. David has been really struggling. He's been forgetting things, getting confused, losing track of conversations. That's concerning, I said, cradling my tea. Has he seen a doctor? We think the family needs professional help. The dynamic between you two isn't healthy. The way you manipulate him with money. There it was, the preview of the campaign she was building. Concerned young fiancé, deteriorating old woman, isolated son, elder abuse, old age wisdom. Number 11. When someone accuses you of manipulation, they're usually laying the groundwork to do it themselves. Jessica, I said calmly, you've made your position very clear. Now let me make mine. I'm not going to fight you. I'm just going to win. Are you threatening me? No, I'm promising you. I've already won. Academic detour. In criminal psychology, the term projective identification refers to when someone attributes their own intentions to another person, often as a defense mechanism. Jessica was projecting with a spotlight and a bullhorn. The next week, my tea stayed warm while I made 3 critical phone calls. The first was to Detective Morrison. I'm ready, I said. He didn't hesitate. We're on standby. Just give us the time and place. The second was to Thomas. Both properties close in 7 days, he said. New account is set up and your documents are ready for distribution. And the process server? I asked. Arranged. He'll be there at 7 p.m. sharp. The third was to my favorite catering company. Dinner for 8. Classy but intimidating. Do you want wine pairings? The girl asked. Yes, I said. And make sure the dessert says closure in chocolate drizzle. Off-topic fact. An octopus has 9 brains, and it can use them independently. So if someone ever tells you women can't multitask, tell them to grow some tentacles. The dinner invitation went out via text. 2. David and Jessica, from Mom. Message, let's have dinner, just us. 7 p.m., my place, I'll cook. David responded with a thumbs up. Jessica replied, looking forward to it. I spent the day arranging seating, metaphorical and otherwise. I put a cushion on every chair except one. That one stayed wooden, uncomfortable, deliberate. Hers. The food arrived, the wine chilled, the paperwork sealed and waiting in the study. At 6:45, the driveway filled with unmarked cars. Detective Morrison, 2 plainclothes officers, and 1 petite woman who looked like she could stare down a hurricane. We're ready? Morrison asked. More than. At 7 on the dot, a knock. Jessica entered first, dressed like she expected to win an award. David followed, nervously checking his sleeves. Wow, Jessica said, scanning the setup. This looks expensive. Well, it's not every day I get to throw a farewell dinner, I said, gesturing to the table. David blinked. Farewell? Before I could answer, Morrison stepped from the hallway. Jessica Morrison, he said calmly. She froze. Her eyes darted toward David, then me. What is this? David, I said. Meet Detective Morrison, Jessica's half-brother. Jessica's face collapsed in on itself, a supernova of panic. Danny, she hissed. What are you doing? My job. Academic intermission. When a narcissist is confronted publicly, their reaction can range from denial to rage to a full-scale meltdown. Jessica opted for door number 3. You can't do this, she shouted. You don't know what you're talking about. David stepped back, visibly shaken. Morrison produced a file thick enough to squash a tarantula. Jessica Morrison, aka Jessica Wells, Jessica Martinez. You've been under investigation for elder fraud in 3 states. Civil suits in Arizona and Colorado, a criminal conviction in Nevada. We have records, witness statements, and a pattern of behavior that matches exactly what you've attempted here. Jessica turned to David. They're lying. Are they? I asked. Or did you lie about Margaret Thornfield in Tucson? The old woman who died in a facility 3 months after her nephew's fiancé filed for emergency guardianship. David's eyes widened. What? Morrison stepped forward, cuffs ready. Jessica Morrison, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud. falsification of medical documents, and elder abuse. She thrashed, cursed, spat. Gone was the wellness queen. In her place stood the predator. As they led her out the door, she screamed over her shoulder, "You think this fixes anything? Your son will never forgive you." I didn't respond. I just poured wine. The house was quiet after they left, still as a grave, but warmer somehow. The kind of silence that follows a thunderstorm, the calm after chaos. David stood in the middle of my living room, hands limp at his sides, the glow from the chandelier casting tired shadows under his eyes. His tie was crooked. He hadn't touched a single bite of the meal I'd ordered. The dessert sat untouched, closure now smeared slightly from the scuffle. He looked at me like he was seeing something unfamiliar, or maybe like he was seeing me again for the first time in a long time. "Is it true?" he asked softly. "All of it?" "Yes," I said. I had her investigated. I had no choice. He sat down on the couch with the posture of a man whose legs had given up. "I didn't know." "You didn't want to." That stung him. I could see it. But sometimes the truth is a bruise you have to press if you want it to heal. Old age wisdom. Or 12. Forgiveness doesn't begin with an apology. It begins with recognition. Until someone sees what they've done, there's nothing to forgive, only to endure. "I thought she loved me," he said, blinking fast. "She made me feel like I mattered, like I was building something." She was building, all right, just not what you thought. I told her things, Mom, about you, about how you were slipping. She wrote them down. She used them against you, against us. His voice cracked. "You trusted her," I said, keeping my tone even. "That's not your sin, but ignoring the warning signs, that's on you." He put his head in his hands. "I'm so sorry." I sat beside him. "I know." He looked up, eyes red. "How can you even look at me after what I said, what I did? I'm your mother. That doesn't mean I forget, but it means I don't stop loving you, even when I want to shake you until your teeth rattle." A soft, broken laugh escaped him. "Fair?" I poured us both a glass of the wine that had survived the evening. He took it like a man accepting a peace treaty, hands trembling slightly. "You remember the beach house?" I asked. "Of course." "It's gone." He winced. "Yeah, I figured. I needed to protect myself. From both of you. I hope you understand." "I do," he whispered. "God, Mom, she had me thinking you were dangerous, that you were manipulating me." Off topic but poetic. Some turtles can breathe through their butts during hibernation. Survival comes in strange forms. Mine just happened to be legal paperwork and a good caterer. David shook his head. "She used me." "Yes, but you let her." He nodded. "Yeah, I did." We sat in silence for a long moment. The kind of silence that doesn't demand to be filled, just held. "You think she'll go to prison?" "She's going to trial. Detective Morrison said they've wanted her for years. This might finally be the case that sticks." He stared at his wine. "I almost gave her everything, my trust, my family, my future." "But you didn't," I said, "because you're here now." Academic angle. Family systems can heal, but only when the infected part is removed. Jessica had been the toxin, but David had been the carrier. Now the system could begin to repair. "So what happens now?" he asked. "We rebuild, slowly." "And the money?" "I'm keeping it, all of it. I earned it. And you, sweetheart, will earn your way back into this family the same way I built it. Through work, through honesty, and through consistency." He swallowed hard. "That's fair." "One more thing," I added. "Therapy. For me, for both of us." He looked startled. "Really?" "David, I may be a mother, but I'm not a martyr. We both need help. And I want to understand how I missed so many signs. How I raised a son who could be pulled so far from me without even noticing. I want that too, he said. I believed him. There's a strange dignity in losing everything. It strips away the pretense. You stop pretending you're fine, or that things will magically fix themselves. You look at the wreckage and say, now I begin again. He hugged me then, really hugged me. No hesitation, no guilt, just gratitude. Old age teaches you that love doesn't always look like flowers and phone calls. Sometimes it's showing up after you've burned every bridge and still being welcome to rebuild. That night after David left, I walked through my house with bare feet and no armor. I felt the cool hardwood against my soles, the hush of rooms that had held their breath for too long. And I knew this house, my life, was mine again. Jessica had tried to erase me, but I'd written myself back in, louder, wiser, and unapologetically clear. The morning after Jessica's arrest, I stood in front of my mirror and didn't see a victim. I saw a survivor. A little older, sure. A little grayer at the temples, but sharper, steadier, and armed with something better than revenge, clarity. Before breakfast, I made one last call to Serenity Springs, the facility Jessica had once so confidently arranged to have me committed to. I asked for Nurse Angela. "Oh, Mrs. Cooper," she said, bright and warm. "I was hoping I'd hear from you. Did everything go okay?" "You could say that," I replied. "The operation was successful. The tumor's been removed." She laughed. "We've all been rooting for you." You'll never know how much that meant to me. Angela had been my quiet lifeline. During those 72 hours, while Jessica and David plotted my future from outside the locked doors, Angela had made sure I didn't lose my sense of self. She smuggled me tea bags, printed articles I requested, and even handed over a manila envelope containing every psychological evaluation I'd passed with flying colors. Old age wisdom. For 13. If you're ever in a room full of people telling you you're crazy, find the nurse who brings you tea. That's your ally. Before I left the facility, Dr. Summers gave me her final verdict. I was competent, sane, and not in need of further intervention. She looked disappointed. I didn't blame her. Jessica had probably painted such a vivid picture. Summers was expecting someone who tried to eat pudding with a stapler. "I still recommend family therapy," she added. "I'll send you a postcard from the sessions," I said. After the criminal trial, I had left Serenity Springs with my dignity intact, and a flash drive containing hours of recorded conversations between Jessica, David, and medical professionals. Documentation, as Nurse Angela called it, was a woman's best armor. Off topic but telling. Some species of female dragonflies fake their own death to avoid mating. I'd fake memory loss next time I need to dodge a wedding invitation. With the properties sold and the funds moved to a private bank, I now had a safety net as wide as Jessica's ambition had once been. But I wasn't planning to hide behind it. I had plans. First, I helped Detective Morrison sort through additional statements from Jessica's past victims. 2 of them had passed away. One, Harold Brennan, was still living in a care facility in Colorado, placed there after a nearly identical scheme involving a niece's girlfriend. "I talked to Harold's daughter," Morrison told me. "She's willing to testify." "Let's make it count," I said. Second, I made a list of every woman I knew who might be at risk. Widows, divorcees, retired teachers, anyone with a paid-off house and an overly charming new friend. I called them one by one. "You don't know me well," I told them, "but I want to share a story. You might think it'll never happen to you, but that's exactly what I thought too." Academic footnote: community-based prevention is a proven method of combating elder abuse. People don't fall through the cracks when others are actively watching the floor. Meanwhile, David began therapy. Real therapy this time, not the echo chamber Jessica had engineered. "I talked about Dad today," he said during one of our monthly dinners. "And you, a lot about you. Do I come off more as a hero or a cautionary tale? He smirked. Both. We were healing slowly, the kind of healing that leaves marks, but also makes room for new things to grow. Jessica, on the other hand, didn't get a slow recovery. She was denied bail, and her court date was scheduled for the spring. Morrison believed she'd try to plea again, but this time, the charges were more serious. Federal-level fraud and documented conspiracy. She's good, he told me, but you were better. I had to be, I said. She had a head start. There's a famous proverb that says, "A lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is still putting on its shoes." That may be true, but eventually the truth shows up. Shoes on, hair combed, and holding a subpoena. Off topic, wombats poop cubes. Just thought you should know. One afternoon, I took a solo trip to the coast. Not to the beach house, of course. That was gone. Sold to a young couple who actually planned to live in it instead of plot around it. No, I went to a small inn nearby, the kind with flower boxes and fresh coffee in the lobby. I walked along the shore and imagined Robert beside me, his hand in mine, his voice in the wind. "I handled it," I whispered. "She didn't win." The water replied in hushes, waves that came and went like regrets. But I didn't feel regret. I felt something else. Peace. The sun was just beginning to dip behind the rooftops when I laid out the dinner table one last time. Not for celebration, not for forgiveness. This time, it was for truth. Everything was in place. Linen napkins, my grandmother's china, 3 wine glasses at each setting, and a tiny envelope at the center of each plate, sealed with gold stickers that said, "For your review." The main dish was already warming in the oven, the dessert resting in the fridge, with a frosting message written by a slightly confused but obedient baker. Here comes the truth. At 6:30, the doorbell rang. Detective Morrison entered with his team, dressed down in jeans and blazers to keep things casual, but no less official. He gave me a brief nod, placed a briefcase on the sideboard, and checked his watch. "You ready for this?" he asked. "I've been ready since the day she called me a confused old woman," I said, brushing invisible dust from my sleeve. Off-topic insight. Penguins propose with pebbles. A whole ecosystem of courtship over rocks. It's touching and hilarious, and strangely more honest than how Jessica approached marriage. At 6:59, headlights appeared in my driveway. David's new pickup, purchased under Jessica's guidance but now fully his burden, rolled in slowly. He got out first, alone. "No, Jessica." I opened the door before he could knock. "She's not coming," he said quietly. I raised an eyebrow. Did she decline my hospitality? "She left, said she needed space." "Ah," I nodded, "like a prison cell." He almost smiled, but didn't quite manage it. He stepped inside, glanced at the pristine table, and then at the plain manila folders in the center of each place setting. "What's all this?" "Evidence." David took a seat at the head of the table, his father's old chair. Morrison sat across from him and opened his briefcase. Inside, printouts, photos, financial records, digital forensics. The kind of paperwork that tells a story more brutal than any accusation could. "We've confirmed," Morrison began, "that Jessica has used 3 different identities over the last decade, each linked to elder abuse cases, fraudulent power of attorney requests, and falsified mental health evaluations. In every instance, the pattern is nearly identical." David listened without speaking. He didn't blink much, just stared at the paper like it might start screaming at him. "This," Morrison slid forward a glossy photo, "is Margaret Thornfield, the woman who died alone in a facility Jessica arranged. No family contact, no assets left. And this," another sheet slid across, "is Harold Brennan, still alive, still in care. His nephew's fiancée, Jessica again. documented memory loss and erratic behavior that led to a court-ordered psychiatric hold. Academic footnote: in legal psychology, there's a term called coercive caregiving. It's when a caregiver manipulates mental health and dependency narratives to gain access to control, assets, and power. It's difficult to prove, but with a pattern, it's damning. "She played me," David said finally, his voice quiet. "No," I said. "She played us. I should have seen it." "You couldn't have," I said, pouring him a glass of wine. "She knew exactly where your blind spots were. That's how people like her operate." He looked up, eyes wet. "But you knew." "I heard enough," I said, "and I trusted my instincts." Old age wisdom. Number 14. When someone shows you who they are the first time, believe them. But if you miss it, forgive yourself. Even smart people get fooled, especially by those they love. Morrison leaned back. "We have enough for a conviction. She'll likely take a plea deal to avoid a longer sentence. But you'll be asked to testify, at least in the civil cases." David swallowed hard. "I'll do it if it helps." "It will." I stood, retrieved the dessert, and placed it on the table. The frosting shimmered in cursive. "Here comes the truth." David stared at it, then laughed. A real laugh, short and broken. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said. "I know I keep saying it, but I am." "And I know you mean it," I replied. We cut the cake, not to celebrate, but to close a chapter. After Morrison and his team left, David stayed behind. We talked late into the night. About Jessica, about the lies, about the little red flags he'd ignored like a boy kicking gravel on the way home from school. "Do you think I'm weak?" he asked. "No," I said, "but I think you were lonely." He nodded. I didn't realize how easy it was to mistake manipulation for love. "You're not the first. You won't be the last." Off topic, but relevant. Some species of caterpillars mimic the appearance of snakes to avoid predators. Survival isn't about strength. It's about illusion. Jessica had survived for years through illusion. But illusions fade when confronted with truth. And now, her curtain had dropped. I watched David leave that night with his head low but his spine straight. A little older, a lot wiser, just like me. 6 weeks after the arrest, I received a letter in the mail, formal, embossed, and more self-righteous than it had any right to be. From Jessica. Typed, of course. No handwritten apologies in blue ink. Just sterile courier font and legally cautious phrasing. She expressed regret for any emotional distress, claimed she had acted under the strain of familial misunderstandings, and noted her commitment to personal healing and growth. In other words, she didn't say, "Sorry." She said, "I'm sorry you feel that way." The non-apology that every manipulator has tattooed on their soul. I folded the letter neatly, tucked it into a drawer I labeled delusional correspondence, and made myself a cup of Earl Grey with extra honey. Old age wisdom. 15. Just because someone extends an olive branch doesn't mean you have to make a salad with it. Jessica was in a holding facility awaiting trial. Her lawyer had floated a plea deal, hoping to shave years off her sentence in exchange for cooperation in other cases. Morrison was thrilled. He said it might finally crack open similar fraud networks. I told him I'd be even more thrilled if she learned how to sit still for 5 years and reflect. David visited once a week now, not just to say sorry, but to show it. He helped me sort the attic, replaced my water heater, even brought over flowers from the same corner shop Robert used to use. More importantly, he was showing up to therapy, on time, with questions. "I've been talking about how I let it happen," he said during one visit. "Jessica, the whole thing. I wanted someone to take care of me so badly after Dad died. I didn't care if they were real. That hit hard. Because I knew that grief doesn't always look like crying or curling up in bed. Sometimes it looks like opening the door to the wrong person and calling it love. Grief makes you dumb, I said, sipping my tea. So does loneliness. We sat together quietly for a while, watching the trees sway in the late afternoon breeze. I've been thinking, he said eventually. I don't want to live in that apartment forever. I want something smaller, simpler, something I can earn. I think that's wise. And someday, I'd like to be trusted again. You're earning it, I said. But David, trust isn't a check you write once. It's a direct deposit, monthly, with interest. He smiled at that. I'll keep making payments. Off topic but charming, male seahorses give birth. Nature is full of partnerships that defy assumptions. Maybe that's what we're working toward now, redefining the roles we thought we had to play. We started hosting a Sunday dinner again, not every week and not just the two of us. I invited a few friends, Elaine, of course, who never forgot a lemon tart, and sometimes Nurse Angela, who came bearing stories and sharp commentary. David helped set the table, always remembering which fork went where. He was quiet at first, humbled. But over time, his laughter returned, unpolished and warm. Jessica's name was never spoken, not out of fear, but because we didn't need to. Some people become chapters so painful you don't reread them. You just thank the universe for the lesson and close the book. Academically speaking, trauma recovery is non-linear. There are spikes, setbacks, and quiet triumphs. It doesn't follow a clean arc, it's messy. But messes can be meaningful. One morning, I got a text from an unknown number. Hi, Mrs. Cooper. My name is Sarah Chen. Detective Morrison gave me your number. I think my stepmother might be doing to my father what Jessica did to you. Can we talk? I stared at the screen for a moment. Then I smiled. I replied, Of course, let's have tea. My place. 2 p.m., I've got records, advice, and lemon tart. And just like that, I felt something I hadn't felt in over a year. Not just peace, but purpose. Jessica tried to erase me. She tried to turn me into a victim, a signature, a retirement fund. But all she really did was sharpen me, give me a story, one I could use to protect others. She thought she was burying me, but really she was planting me. 6 months later, I found myself standing barefoot on the balcony of my new beachfront condo, a glass of wine in hand and the Pacific humming softly in the background. Not crashing, not roaring, just breathing, like me. The condo was smaller than the old house, sure. No attic full of holiday decorations or backyard with rose bushes, but every inch of it was mine, unshared, unclaimed, untouched by whispers behind marble pillars. I'd sold both houses for slightly less than they were worth, but for far more than I needed, because sometimes freedom is worth a little lost equity. That morning, David had called to tell me he'd started a new job. Real job, full-time, salaried, with health insurance, actual meetings, and a cubicle with his name on it. It's not glamorous, he said, but it's honest. I'm proud of you, I told him. I'm trying, Mom. I really am. I know, I said, and I did. We saw each other now once a month, like clockwork, sometimes for coffee, sometimes dinner. The first few were awkward, tiptoeing around the charred ground left by Jessica's fire. But over time, we laughed again, recalled good memories, rebuilt the scaffolding of trust with careful, practiced hands. Old age wisdom at Fifitsarkin. Relationships don't recover all at once. They heal like skin, scabbed, peeled, sometimes scarred, but stronger where they were torn. As for Jessica, she took a plea deal, 5 years in federal prison, with 2 years probation and mandatory restitution to her victims. Of course, most of them would never see the money again. But Harold Brennan got out of his care facility. Margaret Thornfield's nephew apologized publicly, and Sarah Chen's stepmother, now under investigation. The dominoes kept falling. Detective Morrison called me one evening just to say thanks. You helped break open a cycle, Maggie. There are at least 7 victims we didn't know about until Jessica's arrest went public. Glad I could help, I said, sipping my tea. What now? Now we keep watch, he said. There are always more Jessicas. But now there were more me's too. That evening, after my call with David, I found a dusty old photo album in the closet, the kind that smelled like wood glue and fading time. I flipped through the pages, Robert grinning with sand in his hair, David, age 7, with a missing front tooth and popsicle-stained shirt, me, younger and not yet aware that someday I'd be the last one standing at the head of this odd, lovely family. I poured another glass and stepped outside. The breeze was gentle, cool but not cold. A curtain of pink and orange spilled across the horizon. Somewhere down the shore, a dog barked. A couple laughed. Life moved on, like it always does, even after you think it shouldn't. I raised my glass to the sea and whispered, to second chances, to sharp minds in older bodies, to boundaries that protect and truths that liberate. And then, as the sun slipped beneath the water, I toasted one more thing. To mothers, not the soft ones or the saintly ones, but the fierce ones. The ones who love with their whole hearts but draw their lines in concrete. The ones who know that being a mother doesn't mean being a doormat. Because here's what I learned. You can give someone everything, your home, your time, your trust, and they might still try to erase you. But when you remember your worth, your name, your voice, they can't. And if you're very lucky, your story might help someone else remember theirs too.